this book, out of 186 pages, we have 67 pages of artwork. So I need to talk about how I got into that, given the fact that I was a sociologist for 30 years. Why am I calling myself an artist? So, the answer is, I've got so much stuff in my house, there's no room for anything more. And I'm talking about sculpture and paintings. And the first thing I want to say is that I'm reminded of something that happened to me in the Army. When I was in basic training, one morning I was standing in the chow line, and the guy standing next to me said, out of the blue, "When you get old, you're going to live in a motherfucking museum." Well, I was taken aback, but he said this matter-of-factly and without malice, so I let it pass. But it didn't make any sense to me at the time. Was I going to be one of the exhibits? Now it makes a lot of sense to me because there's no more room in my house for any more stuff. I've sold a fair amount of sculpture. I early on made up my mind not to sell any paintings because when we lived in Miami, I asked a professional artist if she concentrated on pleasing herself or pleasing the market. And she said, "Don't paint for the market, paint for yourself." And I took that to heart, so I never attempted to sell any of my paintings. As I said, 67 pages of this book are devoted to painting and sculpture. I got into sculpture first in a serious way because when we lived in Rochester, I took a class in sculpture at the Memorial Art Gallery. And we had live models, they were undraped. One was a black female, and the other was white. And I used clay for modeling, and towards the end of the class, I asked the instructor where I could get this stuff fired. It was terracotta. And she said, well, there's a guy in Canandaigua, Wayne Williams, who teaches classes in sculpture and bronze casting. And I think you should go and talk to him. So I went to Canandaigua. I brought him the two pieces that were in terracotta. They'd already been fired. And he liked my work. And Professor Wayne Williams invited me to join his classes on the days when I didn't have a teaching obligation in Geneseo. So I started driving to Canandaigua, and I sat in on his classes, and he taught me something about welding, which I hated, and bronze casting, which I loved. And he cast several of my pieces, and then he had a friend who was a professional sculptor in Canandaigua who did the more complicated pieces that he didn't feel comfortable doing. So that's how I got my start in bronze and terracotta. Later on, I used industrial materials. I used marble on only one occasion, and that has an interesting history, because after we moved from South Florida to Berkshire County, I brought that piece with me. It was a piece called Janus, carved in marble, and one face, it was two faces. One face was that of a primitive hominid, and the other face was a modern European with a broken nose. And right after we moved to New Marlborough, there was an opening at the New Marlborough meeting house, an art opening, and I was introduced to a guy named Doug Trumbull, one of my neighbors, it turns out. Doug Trumbull did all the special effects for 2001, The Space Odyssey, and several other Hollywood films like The Andromeda Strain. And we had a good conversation, and the next thing that happened was that his wife bought my marble piece, Janus, which had been inspired by the opening scenes in 2001, A Space Odyssey. I had bought the marble in Proctor, Vermont, the same year that the Space Odyssey was released. And who could have predicted that 50 years later, his wife, the wife of the special effects person who did the work for 2001 Space Odyssey, the film, would buy my marble piece, which had been inspired by the film 50 years earlier. You could call it coincidence, but I think there's a better term that was used by Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, and the word is synchronicity. Jung defines synchronicity as an acausal connecting principle. And to me, that's the word that fits this happening in my life. As far as painting is concerned, the only course I took in painting was one that I took at the Norman Rockwell Museum. It was a one-day seminar called The Art of the Visual Joke. And the reason I mention it is because a lot of my paintings fit into that category. As you'll see, some of these paintings are from my book. 67 pages of the book are devoted to my sculpture and paintings. One painting, for example, shows a rocket ship which is in the shape of a Gucci watch case on its way to the mothership, and the mothership looks like is an enormously fat woman, naked fat woman, and that's the mothership. And on the left, in the upper corner, there is my version of a black hole. And When our friends in Miami saw this, I said, "Hector, can you see the black hole?" And he said, "No, I can't see the black hole. Her belly's too big." And his wife kicked him in the shins at that moment. So that's an example of the art of the visual joke. The other theme in my paintings is religious themes, because for some reason those have influenced my artwork. One example would be a piece called "The Wrong Tree," and it shows Adam and Eve and the serpent, and the fruit of the tree looks like the earth seen from space, hanging from a branch. And why is this the wrong tree? Because Adam and Eve were told, you can eat from any tree in the Garden of Eden except the tree of knowledge. And Eve disobeyed the Lord and plucked an apple from the tree of knowledge and ate it and offered half of it to Adam. And as a result of this disobedience, they were cast out of the Garden of Eden and forced to bear children in pain and to toil in the outside world. Well, Eve got a bum rap for this transgression. Eve is depicted as the villain because she disobeyed God. And my argument is that if she had not disobeyed God, we would have remained in an infantile condition forever. Her act of disobedience gave us the knowledge not only of good and evil, but of all the arts and sciences. In other words, Eve put us on the path to becoming truly human. And so for me, she is a kind of Promethean figure and not the villain that she's portrayed to be. In conclusion, I'd like to say that Storyworth gave me an opportunity to come to terms with the negative feelings that I had about my mother. I thought that when my father died in 1967, this would be a big relief for my mother, but I was mistaken. She collapsed. At one point, when I was still teaching at Dickinson College, I got a call from friends in New Jersey who said, "You got to come and get your mother. She's in a very bad way." So I went and picked her up and brought her back to Carlisle, Pennsylvania, to stay with us. One day when I was at lunch in the cafeteria at the college, I got a telephone call saying, "You got to come home immediately. Your mother took pills and attempted suicide, and they've rushed her to Harrisburg in an ambulance in a cyanotic condition." So I went home. Her sister and brother-in-law came from New Jersey while she was at the hospital in Harrisburg. Fortunately, she recovered and came to, well, she recovered sufficiently to move out of her apartment in Brooklyn Heights to a high-rise apartment with a fabulous view of the Verrazano Bridge. And she was fine for a time. She made new friends, and then things went from bad to worse. She had to move in with us in Geneseo, New York, upstate New York, where I was teaching at SUNY. And she went downhill from there. And at the hospital, when a nurse told me that she had dementia, I broke down in tears. It was devastating. Anyway, she was, in retrospect, not only a tragic figure, but also a heroic figure, which is the way my daughter Mimi and my cousin Julie and my half-brother Rene remembered her as a hero. When I was a student, when I was a young man learning about Greek tragedy, I couldn't make the connection between heroism and tragedy, but now that I'm an old man, I can.